want to be free. We want to be free to do what we want to do. And we want to get loaded. And we want to have a good time. That's what we're going to do. Let's testify!
Hello friends, it's RebelKitty, and welcome to the channel. So, for my first sort of official video, I decided I'd sit down and do like a real talk with y'all, where I kind of start discussing more in-depth topics within the gun community, or just outdoors, survival stuff, kinds of things that I participate in myself. So welcome to it. I figured I'd start though with maybe some introductions, since I'm kind of just some rando out of nowhere. But myself, I am born and raised in a rather rural, conservative area that I love deeply. Super beautiful, and I have had access to being outdoors basically my whole life. Raised animals, all kinds of fun stuff, various activities around that involving guns or camping.
You serving up straight MILF realness. I'll have a kid, you deal.
Fun fact, one of my dream jobs was to be a CIA agent.
A weapon to surpass Metal Gear.
And I thought the best way to do this would be, of course, to join the Naval Academy, thinking this is like some big brain play. But turns out, like, I did the summer seminar and I got to the like acceptance period, you know, just that fall before you go, and I didn't clear the medical, so alas. And basically my life has been an improv ever since, but I live it up and I have a good time, and I still continue to go do all kinds of outdoor adventures with all kinds of people. It's been great. But enough about myself. Figured at least a little background in there.
Why are you gay?
But yeah, today what I really wanted to talk about, kind of since things have like been a little heavy thing lately, it's been you know, just a lot of hard stuff to process. So I figured I'd talk something about a little light, and within the gun community probably not so controversial. It's probably like not such a heated topic, at least. I know some folks are gonna whatever.
I got 57 more goddamn rounds in this 4-round magazine.
But the fact is, hunting. I feel like this is not only a super responsible use of weapons, particularly the ones you see here, but it is also, I feel like, a very powerful thing to go out and acquire one's own food for yourself, your family, your loved ones, and community. Whether that's growing cabbage in the garden or getting a squirrel and making stew or something. Like, I realize some folks have moral apprehensions to like eating an animal, and I love animals personally, so it's like there's parts of me that get this, but world's a pretty rugged place. I'm like, and when you're hungry, you definitely, like, you will eat what you need to eat, and your body will kind of like tell you too. So it's like sometimes folks gonna eat meat, and I think this is, when responsibly done, it's an excellent exercise of your rights, way to get food, have an outdoor adventure just as an excuse to go camping and actually interact with animals, not just blapping, but like the idea is you actually have to pay attention to the kinds of species and things that you wish to hunt. Like, you actually have to like research these animals and know their behaviors and the sorts of their psychology.
Boo!
animal psychology. It's fantastic. So, not gonna get into that. But I figured I'd at least, like, a lot of people, it's not discussed a lot, I figure, in typical gun groups that I see. Because this is something that's usually, it's like a traditional sort of, like, thing that, you know, your family's just kind of done and you grew up doing it. And it's sometimes very intimidating for people outside of such a thing to really, like, get into it and understand why you would do that. That's, like, usually it's like, I'm going out on my ATV, I'm gonna go blap some things, and it's not like that. So it shouldn't be like that. I mean, like, some people will make it, but it's, in my opinion, there's a reason, like, very good reason why you go out hunting, and it's not killing. These are, like, very distinct things. Hunting is, like, a very involved activity and skill that requires a lot more layers than just pulling a trigger. So that said, I figured at least, like, kind of give a little 101 on how one might start, or, like, things one needs to consider and prepare for if it's something we want to get into. So I think first things first, the hunting license. This is going to be, like, pretty much ubiquitous regardless of which country you live in, or, like, which state or county. Like, everything's the same there. It's like, at some point, on some level, you will probably need unless, like, there are some indigenous tribes who, like, you know, on their land can do these things, but it's like, that's a pretty niche case. Generally speaking, you need a license. So to do this is usually, so, like, I'm gonna start with a disclaimer now. Hunting laws vary greatly by locality, because it's usually dictated, like, it only can be reasonably managed and dictated by the local government. So, like, there's a million rules and variations, and, like, everyone's locality is going to be different. Even within your state, like, a certain county here will have different things. There's also zones and stuff. So the point is, you're always going to, if you're hunting and plan to hunt somewhere, you would research both your state and that location, because there's huge variations. But typically, again, one of the most ubiquitous is your license. You start with that. How do you acquire a license? This can be done either through your state's Fish and Game will likely on their website have some application form to, like, start this process, something you can do. If you're over 18 or, like, considered an adult where you live, like, typically it's just a matter of paying a application fee and doing the application. No hunter's education is required in some places. I think there are places, though, where even as an adult, if you've never had hunter's ed, they might require that. So, but as an adult, a lot of times that won't be your thing. However, if you're under 18 or not considered an adult in your state, then this would dramatically impact that. Almost, I think, like, everywhere you live, there's, even probably in indigenous communities, I think there's some degree of, like, base level hunters training that they would require you to take, which sometimes costs money, but, like, this is, like, in the range. Like, I afforded this as a kid, hiding money in my shoe. Like, it was like a, you know, it was pretty low percentage of cost. So, like, and typically the tests can be done online, largely. However, there might usually, if you're taking hunter's ed, even if it's online, there's, for, like, the gun safety portion, at least, there's going to be some point at which you meet up to all fire weapons and do stuff. And I honestly think it's really cool. When I was in hunter's ed, I even saw adults who did it, who didn't need to do it by any stretch, but, like, still, either they came from another state and that was what they were familiar with, or that was just something that they thought they, was good to do, and no one's gonna stop you.
Girls only want boyfriends who have great skills.
So yeah, if you pay your application fee, or if you pass Hunter's Ed and you do your application, you get a license. Usually this might get mailed to you, or if at Hunter's Ed, they might issue it to you like right there. It's pretty cool. And then from that point, the idea would be to know what you want to hunt. So it's like, this is going to vary for everyone, depending on where you live. It's going to be, what's the easiest for you to get, maybe. What's the most available? What do you think would be, what would be the easiest thing for you to eat and use all of? Or you would prefer, at least. What's something that, you don't have to go terribly far to find. So let's take North America, for instance. Your most common species of land game that you will hunt are going to include turkeys, pheasants, geese, but also squirrels, rabbits. Of course, then you get to deer, elk, caribou, moose, and predators like bears. People do this, and there is a reason to hunt them.
A bear did cocaine.
And then the fun part. So the idea, in addition to when it comes to deciding what you want to hunt, typically what would determine that as well is what firearm you have. Birds, the turkeys and all that I mentioned, typically would use something like a shotgun with bird shot or turkey shot. Larger game, you would want to use a rifle, because you need something that is able to penetrate and hit those vital organs without bouncing off. Animals' hide is very tough and very, very thick, and bones are very strong. It's bear skulls and bear heads can deflect bullets and stuff like this. And if you don't hit it dead on, a big animal is going to be hard to take down. But on that same end, you probably wouldn't use a large rifle, or a 7.62, for instance, to shoot at squirrels or rabbits that you want to eat. The reason for that would be the bullet would just cause a catastrophic amount of damage to the animal, which is not just both kind of cruel, but just the point is to get meat and to get food and to use the animal. You're sort of countering to that by destroying a bunch of meat and possibly adding a bunch of lead, particulate to the meat, which the less you don't, none of that's good. So the general idea there is that you would, depending on what you have, maybe you have everything, maybe you don't. Maybe all you have is a flintlock musket, and there is legitimately a muzzleloader season, so you could go do this. Maybe you're into archery, so there's a bow hunting season. Personal preference, access, any number of things can, what's legal in your state would dictate these things. But generally speaking, I've hunted small game, plenty of varmints and invasive species. One important task in hunting is the conservation element of it. So, for instance, we would have coyotes that would invade my property, my neighbor's property, our friend's property, and the coyotes would wound and maim sheep, goats, dogs and cats. The coyotes could get pretty nasty. So typically we would go out with like 22s or 17s, a 17 HMR, and would take care of them. So, like, there's multiple facets to why you might use a weapon in a hunting type capacity. There are times where it's not necessary for food. Like with invasive boars in pig species sometimes in the United States. They're super dangerous. So this varies. But ultimately, if you kind of dialed in what you want, I personally like my like ideal is to hunt medium game like deer. Although I do like really really badly want to go hunt elk, but haven't done this yet. So, but deer is kind of like what I'm most comfortable with. And so I thought, oh yeah, another thing, I figured I brought these here as an example of what a reasonable example of a hunting rifle, so that folks actually had like kind of, why would you use this over this? So this is my girlfriend.
This is my wife.
Ruger American 7.62 by 5.1. It is a magnificent rifle, as you can tell. It is very beautiful. It's got a free-floating barrel. And a 7.62, so this would probably be something that would be best adapted for deer to, like, elk, moose, and I think that's pretty safe. A bear would be considered like on the high end of something like that. That they're so thick and their bones are so strong that you would really need something big in order to get through that. So this is more suited to like medium to large size game. And nothing really beats the 308. It's like the most magic round. It does everything. So it's great ballistics. Like, it's super accessible and ready to find, and so generally speaking in North America, I think the 308 is like one of the pinnacle hunting rounds. I used to use something called a Weatherby 257 Magnum, which
I don't know what it's called. I just know the sound it makes when it takes a man's life.
Nobody needs that. It's just insane. It was just the most insane thing ever. So after years of using a ritzed out super rifle, this is where I'm at.
This is how we do action in Uganda.
This is what experience does to you, okay? Experience and grueling poverty and angst will eventually turn your Weatherby into a Mosin Nagant, a 1943. So this is honestly no shit what I plan to take hunting with the iron sights. 9130, all feet of it. Because one, I can. Two, I love this rifle. I can fucking hit anything with it. And I am quite confident in its ability to safely and effectively dispatch a deer. So, another rule: always clear your weapons. Always use firearm safety. I do support this very much. I love people who do this. But yes, this is a little bit ridiculous, and I understand that. I am a little bit ridiculous. I sound the way I do. I'm well accustomed to the idea that I'm a bit odd, and don't always have to be like me. Don't usually, ever. But I do things, and I believe it in how I do them. So this is unironically what I would try to use, and I think, and there's a lot of really old grizzly hunters who, trust me, get to a very similar level where they're pretty much using like the old beaterist rifle that they've had forever, because they're like, I hate sighting in my $1,000 loophole scope thing. Like it's such a pain in the ass to get perfect, and then I'm always worried about getting it dinged, and then the lenses and all the. It's like having the nicer the rifle, the more anxiety you have running around with it. So it's like, honestly, it really comes to like it's just like, I know it's gonna work, I know it's gonna do a thing. That's why I brought this, because I feel like this is a far more like normal, sane person choice. Like anyone going out for their first time should take something like that. My recommendation, personally. I can hear people getting out of their bathtubs right now. Let's move on. So not only do you need a license, not only do you need to scout what you need to hunt, you need to know where you're going to hunt, of course, which is part of knowing what you're going to hunt. But then this brings us to tags. So don't quote me on this. I am not sure how this works in every country. I'm not sure how this works, if this system is ubiquitous, but at least in North America, there's a system where you purchase tags. So a tag basically is something that you would put on the animal that you hunted to verify that, like, A, it's yours and you did it, and then B, that it is what you were authorized to hunt. So a tag, these can be bought like several different ways, but as long as you have a license, tags are usually pretty like accessible to purchase. A lot of tags you can just buy at your sports outdoor store, or like if you have your license already, you can buy at Walmart's, like a lot of outdoors places, and then online, of course, if you got your license through that way, or there's just, accessibility reasons, like you can get them online. But the idea is you get like a tag specific to an animal, like a species. It's specific to a time period. Most places you can't hunt does. You can't hunt female species. However, in a lot of cases, there are exceptions for either youth hunters can get doe license, like tags often. Is usually kind of what that's reserved for. And then if they're like for conservation reasons, if they need to, they will allow hunting of more does. But like generally speaking, like that is like considered bad like form and bad practice anyway. Like it's just not good stewardship of animals, like a responsible thing to do. So it's like you try to avoid the ones that might either have babies and future animals that you're trying to hunt, or that you're just trying to keep around. You like at least appreciate these things. So like there is a. Why am I having a stroke? And of course, like, so to kind of loosely cover the topic of poaching, like this is a lot of times where like what poachers are doing is they're skipping this step with the tag. They may have be licensed hunters and all kinds of like legit people poach. It's crazy. It's like nuttiness. Weird cringe subculture of poachers is like something else. But it's a thing. They're out there. They do stuff. And, like, so, you know, like, there's a reason why, I understand why people sometimes get annoyed with, like, fish and game agent checkpoints and, like, the dudes, like, mobbing up on your camp, kind of, and being like, yo, you got a license for that, mate?
Good evening, sir. I certainly heard you got a license for that, right?
And like stuff like that. But to be frank, there is a lot of problems with people not abiding by this stuff, or hunting. You know, they hunted a doe and they had a buck tag, and like, I don't know. For some people, that is mentally to them a small mistake, but that I don't know. That's death by 1,000 paper cuts. If you have 100 of these incidents, how many? What's that going to do to deer populations? And now you can't really gauge where the heck that's going to go. And so it's like, come on. There's just no reason. These things are usually quite reasonably priced. I'd say, honestly, the hardest thing with them has never been getting one for the species I want. It's simply getting to a, like, hunting in a location, having a tag for a zone or an area that is just not flooded with people.
Bad day to be a deer.
It makes such a huge impact depending on how many random people are just like around and present. It's not really meant to be a super social sort of endeavor. Like, the more people you throw into the mix running around popping off shots, the less deer, like, I mean, no, you know, it's just gonna scare them all off. The deer are pretty smart and they have great instincts and they'll eventually avoid this. So it's like, you know, what are you gonna do? So, like, trying to find somewhere that's remote, like, it's accessible, that you can still get you and your gear and your camp set up to, but, like, is somewhere that's just not flooded with people. And that's where I think the year-long scouting and camping comes in, because that's what you're doing then. You're not when you want to hunt and actually get the animal, because I feel like it's too late and you're probably already picking places that people are going. So by scouting and camping and hiking and going to places around you, you can, like, get to know where you would go. You like, yeah, I gotta avoid the Orange Army is like what I call it. And you know, good on you. You gotta be safe out there. You gotta be visible, or like that helps. But like, it's like a mindset. It's a proverbial metaphorical thing. The Orange Army is like a mass of people that just like seem to lack any self-awareness of what they are doing, and they just like mobbing up on ATVs, chasing the deer around or whatever they're doing with the ATVs, and it's like, that's not what this is.
People can stop it.
So now you've planned your hunt. You have your license. You like know what you want. You got your tag for it. You're like ready to go. It's like, it is the season. It is October. It is go time. You're like, let's boogie. And you like, a lot of people kind of just like in their minds, and it's like, I do it too. It's super easy to do, but just sort of like equate it a lot with camping, because there's a lot of like overlapping sort of attributes. There's a lot of things you do when you're camping. You're bringing your tent. I mean, not all people do this, so I'm like, sorry if I speak from a perspective of someone who like just, I'm like, I live by very little means, and
I'm a broke bitch,
and so with little stuff, I'm like, this Polaco would be fine with me. It's like, I'm pretty good with that. So it's like, I just kind of that's the life I came from. But because yeah, I never used campers or like, you know, some people have like camper trailers, or like they would stay in their grandpa's lodge up in the far wilds. I'm like, I wish, that'd be badass as fuck. That sounds cool. But so yeah, not every one of us could. But you still, you know, you go figure out a little niche somewhere where you can, where no one else wants to go. But you get to your hunt and you do your tent stuff and your camping things, of course, right? And I feel like especially that initial prep period. But the actual like hunting process is where it starts to get interesting. So there's a lot of different styles, I think, people go about doing this. There's like blinds are pretty common, especially among like people with accessibility issues, like mobility problems and stuff like this. Like blind hunting, where you sit in a like camouflaged position pretty much, and you wait for your target to come, and then you shoot the, you know, animal. And so that's a thing. There's like tree stand hunting, which is kind of a similar concept. There's people use decoys and bait. I don't really believe in that. And in some states, I'm pretty sure this, like, they have regulations on what kind of decoys and calls you can use and stuff like this. So it's kind of a deep topic in and of its own. But like, I think one of the oldest and what I use is called stalking. So you're you're just going out on foot and you're just using your eyes and your feet and your nose and your ears to try to track them down, which honestly is 1,000 times easier than it sounds, easier than it is. It's like I honestly felt like every time I ever found something, it was a miracle that it did. Like there's some etheric process to it where it's like it just feels like magic, because I'm like, why? But essentially you're traversing terrain a lot of times with some pretty heavy gear. You're bringing supplies with you for like at least a day's worth of food and snacks and water and stuff, and medical supplies, first aid stuff, possibly some tools, and at least enough tools and things to field dress, butcher the animal if you are to get it. And then plus you're holding ammo and your rifle. So it's like you're camping, but it's not quite the same as like a jaunt, just a casual hike. Like this could be pretty strenuous, and so you obviously want to be pretty in decent, reasonable shape.
What? Do you even live, bro? Yeah. You look on that skinny-licious, man. The girl's bigger than you.
I see people, big old people, climb up cliffs to go hunt stuff. Like I don't think it's a matter necessarily of like physique, but it's like there's just a conditioning. Like as long as you can get up and down terrain with relative, like with stamina, and like keep it up, not sweat too much. I think like regulating your sweat is one of the most important things. It's like a lot of people can do this and do. It's pretty amazing the people you run into out there too. They're like ancient, decrepit dudes. It's like, like you find them and they've been living in the woods. But the fabulous is like some of these people are really inspirational. So yeah, you're traversing terrain. It can be pretty rugged. You have a lot of stuff, and then mind you, if you do get the animal as well, you gotta haul it back out in quarters. So unless you brought like some sort of pack animal or the ATV, like some kind of thing, like I always dreamed of having a horse, like a hunting horse. Would be super cool. But like yeah, the idea is you still have to haul it out. So you're gonna be pretty weighed down. You gotta be able to carry some stuff. And you need to be pretty prepared for changes in like a kind of unless you're like constantly on the NOAA radio listening for weather and like taking readings and stuff. You frankly should prepare for a adverse weather scenario. Like at least if you're carrying a poncho, plush palatka, like some kind of thing that's they're usually pretty small and light, but you know, try to prepare for something that you might not be in presently, but could happen. Once you like find what you're looking for, it's quite the process. Some folks might, like, there's tons of variations, because some folks might just set up right there. Right? The moment they see something, the moment they see a hare, they like drop their stuff, set up the tripod, get the scope out, you know, measure the range, check the windage, you know, Coriolis effect.
How far are those trees? 500 yards.
No. 600.
300.
300. How'd you figure that?
3 football fields.
3 football fields. That's right. You take what you know, and then you multiply. Please don't use your dicks.
You know, people do this, and it's efficient. And I have certainly taken out a buck in a similar fashion. But I feel like this is not necessarily gonna be the most realistic scenario for folks like that. You know, like you gotta have pretty high confidence in your ability to hit a singular point, because another key tenet in hunting is to not wound the animal. I feel like there's a lot of obvious reasoning there, but like, I mean, for a lot of things, if the animal was gonna suffer, it's gonna run, it's gonna stress out and screw up meat and kind of just, you know, like, it's just not gonna be good. So your ideal thing to do is to use one shot for the thing that you're hunting. You'll learn where its vitals are. You know which sort of facing or which sign of the animal would be the best suited for not hitting tons of meat you want to eat. And yeah, the idea is to do like minimal damage. Again, it's not like hunting is not the same as killing in a lot of. And
I suppose I can't tell you much. The mountains can't tell you better.
What's Grandpa talking about?
And more often than not, I've had to, you know, basically just kind of crawl. No joke.
It's not a joke.
The idea, though, is like you want to avoid being upwind of your target. So animals have a super adept sense of smell. If you're upwind of them and that wind carries your scent, which even if very subtle, they will notice this, and it's a strange smell, so they'll instantly be alerted and, you know, wondering what the heck. And it's very easy to lose track of, because wind might change during the day. So it's something to always be mindful of when you're positioning yourself relative to what you're stalking. And then you might need to crawl or traverse in some way towards it to get closer. Something like, even when you're walking around generally, try to always use quiet footsteps. Step with your heel first, and this actually because the idea is not necessarily you're running around doing a sprint. You're just trying to be silent. So that helps. As you get closer, and like as soon as you kind of feel you're ready in position, you can line up your shot. A lot of people do it differently. I've used my bag several times. It's kind of where I'm at in my preference. I'll just use whatever my day bag is as kind of like a rest, to get just like the perfect shot. But I've also used a monopod. Some folks use bipods that are mounted already on there, what have you. So, you know, anything you do to be stable as possible. And again, make it one shot. Kind of hold your breath, exhale halfway, and kind of like right at that point where you're done exhaling and holding your breath is where you would pull. And then the idea is to hit, you know, dead center. If you accomplish this task, like if they never noticed you, if you manage to get close to them, if you manage to set up and you manage to take your shot successfully, which takes a million variables to all come together, but it is a glorious moment. So I will say also, in part of pulling the trigger and using your rifle or weapon, just generally speaking, never use it. It is not a substitute for binoculars. Never use it alone as a method of just looking out and identifying things. Always practice gun safety. And gun safety in the context of a hunter is going to have some slight, you know, different considerations. So, like, for instance, when, you know, like, you don't know where other people are going to be. Other people out there are wearing camouflage and ghillie suits and Lord knows what. So, I mean, to be honest, yes, you can have reasonable certainty that someone's not there. But that is not an excuse to just use your weapon. You know, like, this isn't the military. We're just out, you know, with animals and stuff. It's like, and people are really not going to be friendly with you if you do that. So I would avoid that. I'll use binoculars and things like this, and then you use your rifle scope at that moment where you are, you know, finally taking aim at your target. When you're when you're taking aim at that target, make sure that there's some adequate backstop. That means that there's some surface on the other side of where you're aiming that if you were to shoot a bullet would land and impact that, instead of just sailing freely into the air. Because, again, while there is an extremely high likelihood that no one would be on the other side, you don't have visual you don't have, like, ESP to know that there isn't. Like, you just don't. So it's not proper to take a shot where the bullet could pass through and go into free air over, you know, some space that you can't see. If you don't know where that bullet's going to end up, you shouldn't take that shot. And that's just safe. And I think safety is always more important than just getting what you wanted.
It's not a joke.
So gun safety spiel always is like obligatory. But then, yeah, so once if you have succeeded in getting the animal, you must now, like, dress it and clean it and prepare it for future butchering, but also condense it down in such a way that you can actually travel and carry it back to camp or wherever you need to go. So that process typically starts with what's called quartering. So you'd use some kind of like a larger knife, a tonto knife, or like a kukri or something, or like a larger, heavier set knife. Some folks would use like a hatchet. And you would cut the largest chunks, like legs or whatever, into separate pieces. Obviously, for purposes of your tag, I think what they teach you first in Hunter's Ed, and the first thing that you really need is the confirmation of the sex. So you would gather those organs. This is going to vary for animals too. I don't think for a turkey, for instance, I'm not sure there is a process for that. I don't know how that works. Like what the proof of because the proof of sex would be pretty visual. So I'm like, at least like for deer, you know, things are different. But you would need to fulfill the requirements of your tag, and then, because part of the dressing process, the field dressing is what it's called, is putting your tag on the animal. So you get the verification of the sex. You start draining, you know, blood and fluids. So like the idea is, one, you're going to be taking it and carrying it anyway, but also any warm like fluids and things left in the animal will start to decay and like get funky. Let's be real. So nobody wants that. You kind of want to drain all those fluids out and extract like vital organs and things. You'll want to separate that from probably the rest of your meat.
The international communist conspiracy to sap and impurify all of our precious bodily fluids.
As again, just sort of like a sanitary thing. Anything that might have like fluids and soft tissues, you'll want to keep separate from your meat, like the red meat. And you take what you are going to use, which for people should be all of it. I realize for some, in some cases with coyotes and stuff like this, there's not always a realistic purpose for everything. But generally speaking, with the animal that you hunt, you're trying to use as much as you can. So you take all these things, the things that you've quartered with you, and you hoof it out. You make sure, again, that the tag is with that animal, and then the next step from there is taking it home to get it butchered. And, there's a million ways to do that. It's a whole thing on its own. I feel like I really covered a shit ton in just that. So, forgive me if it's super boring.
Why are we still here? Just to suffer?
Super, awful. But I do feel like I covered a lot there. And I hope it was at least somewhat informative and helpful, or a different perspective. And a use for your weapons that is totally legal. It's a good thing for the community. You can help people, your friends, other trans folks. There's a lot of things you can do with that. So I think it's a very useful skill, and it's something that's just super it's bizarre because you have two cultures. You have a hunting culture that is just insane. It's huge. And then you have the gun culture, which is and there's so many things that overlap here. And I feel like a lot of people who are looking for healthier ways to sort of use martial training or their guns and productive things to do with them, hunting is an excellent example. So that was a perfect thing to kind of cover in a first video. If you have questions and stuff, by all means shoot me a thing or send me do the comments. I'm not doing this for money. I'm not really big on that kind of stuff. If you've ever seen any of my content, obviously I don't care for views and stuff like that. So I do this because it's the love of doing the things I do and sharing, and just kind of I feel like folks need a little just brevity and everything, and I'm I certainly distract. So yeah, thank you for joining me with this one. Sorry, it's pretty rough cut. It's my first real gig trying like anything proper like this, so it's like I'm sure screwed it up. I'll have to edit a million things. That's life. But yeah, I appreciate it very much. Yeah. Y'all have a good one. Always love. Much peace. Oh fuck.
'Cause you done goofed.
Love. Peace.